You may be happy to know that I will not be reciting any poetry this week. But I have so little direct experience with the very serious issues that we've been discussing this week that I had hoped to interview some people that had more practical experience. And yet I found that they were very reticent to share their stories when they knew the context, when they knew that this was going to be shared with other people. And so I began to think about how personal and painful these things really are for the people that experience them, and find something of a common thread maybe in the fact that all of them in some way in my mind lead to a kind of isolation. I mean, really, what is a more serious suffering than loneliness? We are social beings. We're created to support one another and to live in communion with others, but we don't always do it very well. And this is really a great poverty, the lack of love or the lack of ability to accept the love that's being given to us, whether that's for psychological or emotional or physical reasons, whatever the case is. Somehow it reminded me of Henry Nouwen, and I think in the first week, in one of his videos, he said, in the gospel, we're told, blessed are the poor, not the people that serve the poor, blessed are the poor, but the people that do serve the poor benefit in some way because we are made aware of our own poverty, our own weaknesses, our own shortcomings, and our hearts are expanded. But whenever we think about suffering, our own or other people's, we need to think of it in a context that takes us beyond the natural. You know, our own natural resources will only achieve so much, but we are given supernatural resources, spiritual resources, including the truth that Christ is suffering in solidarity with every soul, and we can suffer in solidarity with him, and that we're never alone, that we're never alone. This is the great gift, I think, that we can bring to people who are suffering. We can't eliminate suffering in this life. We can alleviate sometimes other people's sufferings, but our proper response to suffering is simply to be with, to be for the other person, the suffering person. And sometimes this is a very long journeying. Sometimes it's an entire lifetime. And this is hard for us because we like things in neat boxes and well-ordered file folders. But very often, these things don't fit into neat boxes or file folders. We sometimes have to open ourselves to unanswerable questions. And these unanswerable questions are provoked by other people's pain and suffering. And yet, love, I think, needs to be able to expose itself fully. We have to be able to expose our very identity in some way to the suffering of another and to those questions that are provoked. Christ taught us, of course, that the way to love other people is to pour ourselves out for them, to be willing to take on their sorrow and pain and to suffer with them and for them. It's only in our willingness to transcend our own pain for the sake of others and to open ourselves to their pain and suffering, to reach out to them in love in the middle of that sorrow, that we are fully human. And we can see that a world that was void of this kind of self-giving love would be a world that was meaningless, and it's the existential question, I guess. When we live in isolation, when we think like existentialists that hell is other people, then we have failed to be fully human. On our side, on the side of those of us who are reaching out to people who are suffering, we have to appreciate that there is within us love that we don't know exists until we're called beyond ourselves and asked to give. In some ways, we're all like Simon of Cyrene, who, when he was called out of the crowd to help this Nazarene get his cross up the hill, didn't know what he was capable of, nor to what he was called, and actually wanted to stay out of it. He didn't really want to expose himself to the suffering of this criminal or to the ridicule that it would probably bring on him. And yet, there was Christ under the cross, willing to accept his help. And what a moment under the cross that must have been. In a lot of ways, we're all Simon. We're all called beyond ourselves to help one another and not hide from the suffering around us. When we respond generously to this call, we can't predict what will be opened up within us. But this self-gift never fails to enlarge us for greater things. I think we are often surprised by what we're capable of when we are suffering, but I think we need to be also open to the kind of surprise that comes from knowing what we're capable of giving to people who are suffering. And the more we give, the more we find within ourselves greater capacities for love. And the more we conform ourselves to the self-giving of Christ himself, the more we become our true selves. Because by his wounds of love, we are healed. Healed of sin, we're freed to love fully. And in sacrificing ourselves for love of others, infinite capacities of love are opened up within us. And it's this infinite capacity for love that's our eternal destiny.